Imagine constantly feeling like a chess piece in someone else's game, controlled in your relationships, at work, even in the endless scroll of your social media feed. What if these feelings weren't random anxieties, but calculated attempts to subtly control you, to steer your choices, and to erode your sense of self? What if you could become immune to these tactics, reclaiming your power and navigating the world with unwavering autonomy? Today, we will explore the hidden world of manipulation, revealing a secret technique from one of history's most controversial figures, Machiavelli, to help you fortify your mind and shield yourself from undue influence. Manipulation is far more pervasive than most of us realize, subtly shaping our decisions, from the mundane choices of what brand of coffee to buy to the far more significant decisions of who we trust with our hearts and our futures. Modern psychology is increasingly confirming the insidious nature of manipulation, revealing how these subtle tactics can erode self-worth, diminish autonomy, and leave individuals feeling trapped in cycles of coercion and control. But what if the key to understanding and resisting manipulation has been staring us in the face for centuries? Machiavelli, often mischaracterized as a champion of ruthless ambition, was also an astute observer of human nature, a keen analyst of power dynamics, and a master of seeing through deception. Think about the political stage, where Machiavellian tactics are often employed, yet rarely understood by the very public they target. The question, therefore, isn't whether manipulation exists; it demonstrably does, all around us, but how to recognize it, understand its underlying mechanisms, and develop effective defenses against it. In this video, you'll learn how to identify common manipulation tactics, understand the psychological principles that make them so effective, and apply Machiavelli's secret technique for self-defense, transforming yourself from a potential target into an informed and empowered individual. We'll reveal how seeming weaknesses can be exploited as strengths, why appearing predictable is inherently dangerous in a world filled with manipulators, and the unexpected power of strategic inaction as a countermeasure. And the most profound insight: the best defense against manipulation isn't aggression or confrontation, but awareness, calculated resistance, and a deep understanding of human nature. Now, at this point, you might be feeling a bit skeptical. Machiavelli is, after all, often associated with unethical behavior, political intrigue, and the ruthless pursuit of power. It's perfectly understandable to hesitate before delving into what might seem like dark or morally questionable tactics. Many of us have experienced the sting of manipulation firsthand and struggle to identify it as it's happening, often only recognizing it in hindsight, leaving us feeling vulnerable and exploited. But the goal here isn't to become a manipulator yourself, but to understand the methods used against you, to see the puppeteer's strings, and ultimately, to turn their strategies back on themselves, dismantling their power and reclaiming your own. So, let's delve into Machiavelli's world and uncover the secret technique that can empower you to never be manipulated again. But how can we reconcile the wisdom of resisting manipulation with the seemingly contradictory notion of employing deception, even for self-defense? Isn't that just fighting fire with fire, potentially becoming the very thing we're trying to avoid? The key, as Machiavelli understood, lies in recognizing that in a world where manipulation is rampant, understanding its mechanisms isn't an endorsement, but a necessary form of self-preservation, empowering you to navigate treacherous social landscapes with strategic awareness, setting the stage for understanding the fox analogy. To truly grasp Machiavelli's approach to resisting manipulation, we must understand his concept of playing the fox. Machiavelli argued that a wise leader, and by extension, anyone seeking to navigate the complexities of human interaction, must possess the qualities of both the lion and the fox. The lion represents strength and courage, while the fox embodies cunning and intelligence. But here's the twist. While the lion can be easily caught in traps because of its reliance on brute force, the fox, with its sharp senses and ability to recognize deception, can evade those traps altogether. To be manipulated is to be caught in a trap, and like the fox, we must be able to identify those traps before we stumble into them. This brings us to three critical components of playing the fox: observation, psychological insight, and strategic thinking. First, keen observation is crucial. This means paying close attention to the behavior of those around you, noticing inconsistencies between their words and actions, and identifying their underlying motivations. Are they genuinely interested in your well-being, or are they trying to gain something from you? What are their vulnerabilities, their desires, and their fears? Without keen observation, you will be prone to blindly trusting anyone and easily manipulated. Second, understanding human psychology is paramount. Manipulators exploit our cognitive biases, our emotional vulnerabilities, and our deep-seated desires. By understanding these psychological levers, we can anticipate how manipulators might try to exploit them and develop defenses accordingly. Understanding the psychology of manipulation will give you the insight needed to successfully play the fox. Finally, strategic thinking is essential for countering manipulation attempts. This involves devising plans, adapting to changing circumstances, and being willing to act decisively when necessary. Think of it as a chess game, where you must anticipate your opponent's moves and plan your own accordingly. Now, let's examine how these principles played out in real-world scenarios, both historically and in modern times. Machiavelli himself was a master of observation and strategy. Living in the tumultuous political landscape of Renaissance Italy, he witnessed firsthand the rise and fall of powerful figures, the betrayals, and the intrigues that characterized the era. Despite facing periods of political exile and even torture, Machiavelli managed to survive and leave behind a legacy of political thought that continues to be studied and debated today. Think about it. His ability to navigate those treacherous political waters stemmed from his keen understanding of human nature and his ability to anticipate the moves of his adversaries. Conversely, consider the example of Louis XVI of France. A well-intentioned but ultimately naive ruler, Louis was unable to recognize the growing discontent among his people and the revolutionary forces brewing around him. He was manipulated by advisors, outmaneuvered by political rivals, and ultimately fell victim to the French Revolution. His inability to play the fox, to see through the deception and understand the underlying power dynamics, led to his downfall. This highlights the importance of not just being good-intentioned, but also being astute and aware of the potential for manipulation. In the modern business world, deceptive marketing tactics are a common form of manipulation. Companies often exploit consumers' desires and insecurities to sell products or services, using carefully crafted messages and persuasive techniques to create a sense of urgency or need. For example, a company might use fear-based advertising to convince people that they need a particular product to protect themselves from a perceived threat. Or they might use social proof, highlighting the popularity of their product to create a sense of bandwagon appeal. Recognizing these tactics is the first step in resisting them. In personal relationships, manipulation can take more subtle forms, such as gaslighting, guilt-tripping, or emotional blackmail. A partner might try to control you by undermining your self-esteem, isolating you from friends and family, or making you feel responsible for their happiness. Recognizing these patterns of behavior is crucial for maintaining healthy boundaries and protecting yourself from emotional abuse. What are some other examples you may have seen? Adopting this Machiavellian mindset, however, raises some difficult questions. Is it truly necessary to be constantly vigilant and skeptical of others' intentions? Does this constant state of alert come at the cost of genuine connection and trust? There is, undeniably, an emotional toll to constantly suspecting manipulation. It can lead to cynicism, isolation, and difficulty building meaningful relationships. Constantly questioning the motives of others can be exhausting and create a sense of distance. It can be very difficult to build trust with others if you are constantly questioning their true intentions. And here's the crucial ethical consideration. How do we use this knowledge responsibly without becoming manipulative ourselves? The line between self-defense and aggression can be blurry, and it's important to avoid crossing it. We must strive to use our understanding of manipulation to protect ourselves and others, not to exploit or control them. But here's the most important thing to remember. Self-awareness is paramount. Recognizing your own vulnerabilities to manipulation is the first step in protecting yourself. What are your weaknesses? What are your desires? What are your fears? Once you understand your vulnerabilities, you can take steps to address them, building your self-esteem, setting healthy boundaries, and developing critical thinking skills. And so, now that we've explored the theory and the potential pitfalls, let's turn our attention to the specific tactics Machiavelli advocated and how to recognize them in everyday life. What are the concrete strategies Machiavelli suggests, and how can we use them to turn the tables on manipulators? Stay with me, as what we'll discover next is the profound insight that the power lies not in brute force, but in strategic inaction and the importance of appearing less intelligent than you are. As we delve deeper into the Machiavellian mindset, we must understand that these tactics are not an endorsement of manipulative behavior, but rather a crucial set of defensive tools. In a world where deception often lurks beneath the surface, ignorance is not bliss, it's a vulnerability. But how do we wield this knowledge responsibly, ensuring we remain ethical and avoid becoming the very manipulators we seek to understand? The upcoming tactics are about recognizing patterns of deception and protecting oneself, empowering you to navigate social complexities with strategic awareness, acting as a shield against those who might seek to exploit you. Let's now confront a critical, yet often misunderstood Machiavellian tactic: master the art of deception. This isn't a license to lie and cheat, but rather a call for strategic ambiguity. What does this mean? It means controlling the information you reveal to others, carefully curating the image you project, so you aren't an open book, easily read and exploited. It's about understanding that in the game of power, transparency can be a liability. Think of it like a poker game. Do you reveal your hand to your opponents before the cards are even dealt? Of course not. You carefully conceal your intentions, observe your opponent's reactions, and only reveal information when it benefits you. Strategic ambiguity operates on the same principle. It's not about outright lying, but rather about creating uncertainty, leaving room for interpretation, and maintaining control of the narrative surrounding you. What if outright lying is morally wrong to you? This is why strategic ambiguity is so important. To put it simply, knowing how to project a calculated image protects you from manipulation and gives you the upper hand. Consider the power of silence. It gives no information away. Machiavelli himself was a master of strategic ambiguity. Living in the treacherous world of Renaissance Florence, he constantly had to navigate shifting alliances and political intrigues. He rarely revealed his true intentions, carefully choosing his words and actions to protect himself from enemies. Consider how he managed to serve multiple regimes, each with conflicting interests. He did this by being a political chameleon, never fully revealing his true allegiance, maintaining a degree of ambiguity that allowed him to survive and thrive. Contrast this with someone like Edward Snowden, who, while perhaps acting on noble intentions, revealed a massive amount of classified information, making himself a target and limiting his options. By being so transparent, did he achieve his goals, or did he become a pawn in a larger game? In your personal relationships, strategic ambiguity can be used to avoid revealing too much about your feelings or intentions too soon. Perhaps you are on a first date. Revealing everything at once might scare off your date, instead of building intrigue. This gives the relationship time to breathe and grow organically. Strategic ambiguity protects you from being predictable, allowing you to assess a situation before committing. It's a key tool for observing and evading traps, just like our friend, the fox. So what's the takeaway here? By carefully controlling the information you reveal, you create a protective shield, making yourself a more difficult target for manipulation. However, there's a potential downside. Overuse strategic ambiguity, and you risk appearing untrustworthy or aloof. Knowing when to be open and honest and when to be more guarded is crucial. But here's the rub. How do you strike that balance? How do you remain authentic while still protecting yourself from those who might seek to exploit your vulnerabilities? Stay with me, as the answer to this question lies in our next tactic. But that's not all. There's another layer to this, and it involves exploiting expectations. Can seeming disadvantages be turned into strengths? How can a manipulator be manipulated? This reveals the importance of subverting expectations and using reverse psychology to gain an advantage. What they don't want you to know is that there is an art to appearing weaker than you are. More on this next. Having discussed strategic ambiguity, let's now turn our attention to another powerful, yet often counterintuitive Machiavellian tactic: feigned weakness. This isn't about being weak, it's about appearing less intelligent, capable, or interested than you actually are. But how can appearing weak be a source of power? How does this seemingly passive strategy actually work? To understand this, we need to look to Sun Tzu's Art of War, which states, "When able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive." Feigned weakness is the art of misdirection. It's deliberately downplaying your abilities or knowledge to lull potential manipulators into a false sense of security. Manipulators often target those they perceive as strong or threatening, overlooking those who appear harmless or unintelligent. It is a form of social camouflage. By appearing less competent, you disarm their suspicion, causing them to underestimate you and reveal their true intentions. Think of it as hiding in plain sight. This also can be a great tool when people are envious of your natural abilities. What better way to diffuse envy than by appearing less intelligent? Consider the historical example of the cunning advisor, who pretends to be a fool to gain the king's trust and influence policy from behind the scenes. This advisor understands that the king is more likely to listen to someone he perceives as non-threatening. Odysseus in the Odyssey is another literary illustration. He often feigned madness or weakness to outsmart his enemies, like in the story of the Trojan horse, where his strategic deception led to victory. Think about the story of a shrewd negotiator who pretends to be inexperienced to get the other party to reveal their hand. By feigning naivete, they encourage the other side to drop their guard, revealing crucial information that can be used to their advantage. Similarly, in Shakespeare's Hamlet, Polonius is perceived as a simple old man, but is one of the most perceptive characters in the play, always trying to get information on others. The key is to make others believe they are superior to you, so they will relax their guard. Feigned weakness allows you to gather information, assess your opponent's strengths and weaknesses, and plan your counter strategy without raising suspicion. It's a game of patience, where you build trust and lull your opponent into a false sense of security. However, be warned. If your feigned weakness is too convincing, you may be dismissed or taken advantage of. The goal is to appear harmless, not useless. Another thing to note is the ability to make the manipulator believe your weakness. What makes someone believe someone is weaker than they are? Perhaps this would be a great opportunity to discuss. So, how can feigned weakness be used in everyday life? Perhaps a coworker is trying to take credit for your work, pretend you don't care. Perhaps a friend is bragging about their accomplishments, act impressed and a little bit envious. The key is to appear non-threatening and unassuming, so that others underestimate you and reveal their true intentions. Now, let's delve deeper. How can doing nothing be a form of resistance? And more importantly, what profound insight will we uncover regarding controlling your reactions and using time to your advantage? Recapping all that we've covered so far, we have strategic ambiguity and feigned weakness. How can a pause be decisive? The answer to that lies in strategic inaction. Manipulation often relies on impulse and emotional reactions. But what if you refuse to play that game? What if you strategically pause before reacting? Let's examine how. Strategic inaction is the art of pausing before reacting to manipulative tactics. It's about consciously choosing not to respond immediately, giving yourself time to observe, evaluate, and plan. It's the opposite of knee-jerk reactions, which is what manipulators want. By pausing, you disrupt their carefully laid plans, throwing them off balance and giving yourself the upper hand. Why is this important? Because manipulation often relies on impulse and emotional reactions. The decisive pause consists of observing, evaluating, planning, and responding. Manipulation, more often than not, takes place when someone is forced to make a quick decision. By not giving the manipulator the satisfaction of quick compliance, you are rebelling. Time allows you to reset emotionally and to think through the best course of action. This is more important than many realize. Consider the chess player who takes a long pause, leading to the opponent making a mistake. By slowing the pace of the game, the player introduces uncertainty, increasing the likelihood of the opponent making a mistake. Think about how politicians deliberately slow processes through parliamentary procedure to delay a vote. Giving yourself time to think before responding to an emotional request gives you the space to evaluate the request objectively. You also see this often with a negotiator who calls a break to evaluate. By slowing down the interaction, the negotiator regains control of the situation. Using a pause is not indecision, but the redirection of pressure back onto the manipulator. It forces them to reveal their true intentions, making them vulnerable. The beauty of the pause is that it removes pressure from you, placing it back on the other party. So, what does this mean for you? The next time you sense someone trying to manipulate you, resist the urge to react immediately. Take a deep breath, pause, and give yourself time to think. By doing so, you regain control of the situation and disrupt the manipulator's plans. So, how can these techniques be utilized in a systematic way? Stay with me, because we're just scratching the surface of Machiavellian tactics for self-defense. So, we've explored strategic ambiguity, feigned weakness, and the decisive pause, powerful tactics in the Machiavellian arsenal. These individual techniques are undoubtedly useful, offering immediate advantages in specific situations. But what if there was a way to amplify their effectiveness, to move beyond isolated maneuvers and create a comprehensive, long-term strategy for self-defense? This is where the concept of a personalized Machiavellian playbook comes into play. Are you ready to discover how to make a system tailored to your individual vulnerabilities and goals? Think of a sports team relying solely on individual talent versus having a well-defined game plan. Individual skills can win a game or two, but a systematic approach wins championships. Similarly, mastering individual Machiavellian tactics is a good start, but a strategic system allows for more adaptability, foresight, and ultimately, control over your interactions. This isn't about becoming a master manipulator yourself. It's about recognizing the plays others might run against you and developing effective countermeasures in advance. The key here is to understand that we're talking strategic, not reactive, application. What does this distinction mean for your daily life? The Machiavellian playbook is a framework designed to anticipate, understand, and navigate manipulative situations. It has 3 stages: self-assessment, opponent analysis, and strategic implementation. It's not a rigid set of rules, but a dynamic system that evolves as you learn more about yourself and the world around you. The first stage, self-assessment, is about identifying your personal vulnerabilities, biases, and emotional triggers. What are the buttons people can push to get a reaction out of you? The second stage, opponent analysis, involves observing and analyzing the behavior, motivations, and tactics of potential manipulators. What are their tells? What strategies do they employ most frequently? The third stage, strategic implementation, is about choosing and applying the appropriate Machiavellian tactics based on the situation and the opponent. Which tool from your arsenal will be most effective in this particular scenario? But here's what most people miss. The playbook is not a one-time creation, but an iterative process. It should be constantly updated and refined based on your experiences and new insights. Think of it as a living document that grows with you, providing an ever-sharper lens through which to view the world. The more you use it, the more effective it becomes. Now, let's consider some real-world examples of how this playbook can be applied, revealing its power in action. Let's consider a few examples. Imagine someone who is naturally highly trusting and empathetic. This individual is the type of person who always sees the best in others, often to their own detriment. During the self-assessment stage, they would identify this trust as a vulnerability. They might write in their playbook, "I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when there are red flags." Next, in the opponent analysis stage, they would pay close attention to individuals who might exploit this trust. They might notice a colleague who is overly flattering or who consistently asks for favors without reciprocating. Finally, in the strategic implementation stage, they would use strategic ambiguity and the decisive pause to protect themselves. Instead of immediately agreeing to help the colleague, they might say, "Let me think about that and get back to you," giving themselves time to assess the situation and determine the colleague's true intentions. What if this person didn't have the playbook? Or consider a negotiation setting. Perhaps you are someone who desires to be liked. During self-assessment, this person recognizes the need to be liked and might compromise their position to achieve it. In the opponent analysis stage, they identify the other party's negotiation style as aggressive and uncompromising. Recognizing this, they use feigned weakness to lower expectations and gain an advantage. They might say, "I'm not really an expert in this area, so I'll defer to your judgment," lulling the other party into a false sense of confidence and encouraging them to reveal their bottom line. This allows the negotiator to gain valuable information and negotiate from a position of strength, despite appearing weak. And here's a third, an employee in a toxic work environment. In self-assessment, this employee realizes they are reactive and easily triggered by the negativity. They use their playbook to identify colleagues who are using manipulative tactics to undermine them, spreading rumors, or taking credit for their ideas. In response, this employee uses strategic ambiguity to avoid revealing their plans and the decisive pause to avoid being drawn into conflicts. They might respond to a provocative comment with a noncommittal, "That's an interesting perspective," refusing to engage in the negativity and protecting themselves from further manipulation. How could this employee have protected themselves without this framework? Now, let's analyze the implications of using such a playbook. What are the benefits, and what are the potential pitfalls? The benefits are clear: increased self-awareness, improved decision-making, and greater control over your interactions. By systematically assessing your vulnerabilities and analyzing your opponents, you can make more informed choices and avoid falling prey to manipulation. But there are potential downsides as well. The most significant is the risk of becoming overly cynical or distrustful, viewing everyone as a potential manipulator. This is why setting clear ethical boundaries is so crucial. The Machiavellian playbook should be used for self-defense, not for personal gain or to harm others. It should be a shield, not a sword. Ask yourself, am I using these tactics to protect myself, or am I using them to exploit others? Am I being strategic, or am I simply being manipulative? The answers to these questions will determine whether your playbook becomes a tool for empowerment or a recipe for moral compromise. Because what they don't want you to know is that manipulation can be self-perpetuating, creating a vicious cycle of distrust and deception. But how can we break this cycle and maintain our integrity in a world where manipulation is so prevalent? So, we've seen how the Machiavellian playbook provides a systematic approach to self-defense by combining self-assessment, opponent analysis, and strategic implementation. But building a playbook is just the first step. How can these techniques be applied to long-term strategy and personal growth? What profound insight can we uncover regarding the connection between self-awareness, ethical boundaries, and lasting empowerment? Stay with me, because the most effective defense against manipulation is not just about tactics, but about developing a strong sense of self and a clear understanding of your values. So, we've seen how the Machiavellian playbook provides a systematic approach to self-defense, combining self-assessment, opponent analysis, and strategic implementation. Mastering these tactics arms you against immediate threats, but what truly fortifies you against manipulation in the long run? What if the greatest defense lies not just in reacting strategically, but in building an unshakable inner foundation? This brings us to the idea that tactics alone are not enough. A truly unmanipulable person needs something more, a clear long-term vision and a strong sense of self. Consider this. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, as the saying goes. Without a clearly defined destination, you become easily swayed by short-term gains or emotional appeals, making you a prime target for those with ulterior motives. This section will explore how to cultivate a long-term strategy and align your actions with your core values, transforming you from a reactive player into a proactive architect of your own life. This isn't about mastering manipulation, but about building an internal fortress so strong that manipulation simply can't penetrate it. Developing a personal long-term vision involves defining your goals, values, and purpose in life. What do you want to achieve? What kind of person do you want to be? What impact do you want to have on the world? These aren't just abstract questions. They are the cornerstones of an unmanipulable self. Aligning your actions with your core values means making decisions based on what you believe is right, rather than what is expedient or popular. It means living with integrity, even when it's difficult or unpopular. When you know who you are and what you stand for, it's incredibly difficult for others to control you. Manipulation preys on uncertainty and weakness. A strong sense of self starves it of its fuel. But remember, this strength comes from within. Think about Nelson Mandela's unwavering commitment to ending apartheid. Even in the face of imprisonment and immense adversity, he never compromised his principles. His long-term vision of a free and equal South Africa, coupled with his deep-seated belief in justice, made him virtually unmanipulable. He could not be bought, intimidated, or swayed from his purpose. Or consider a company that prioritizes ethical and sustainable practices over short-term profits. While this may not always lead to immediate financial gains, it builds a strong reputation, attracts loyal customers, and creates a resilient business model that is less vulnerable to market fluctuations and unethical competitors. How much stronger would that company be if they prioritized profit over sustainability? And think about an individual who consistently acts with integrity and compassion, earning the respect and trust of others. This person is less likely to be targeted by manipulators, as their reputation serves as a shield. People know that they are honest and trustworthy, making it harder for others to deceive or exploit them. Contrast this with a leader who makes decisions based on short-term gains, resulting in long-term consequences. For example, a politician who promises tax cuts without considering the impact on the national debt may win votes in the short term, but ultimately harm the economy and erode public trust. This lack of long-term vision makes them vulnerable to manipulation by special interests and short-sighted advisors. But let's not forget the cautionary tale of Icarus. He had the vision to fly, but he lacked the wisdom to understand his limitations. He ignored the long term and flew too close to the sun, melting his wax wings and plummeting to his doom. This serves as a stark reminder that even the grandest visions must be tempered with prudence and a realistic understanding of the world. It's not just about having a vision, it's about executing it responsibly and ethically. What is Icarus's arrogance teaching us about the risks of ignoring long-term thinking? The implications of prioritizing long-term strategy and core values are profound. Manipulators often target those who are easily swayed by emotions or short-term incentives. A clear long-term vision makes you less susceptible to these tactics, as you are less likely to be distracted by short-term temptations or threats. Someone with strong values is less likely to compromise their principles, even under pressure. They have a moral compass that guides their decisions, making them resistant to manipulation. But here's a twist. The unmanipulable self can sometimes be a delusion. What if our values are flawed? What if our vision is based on incomplete information or biased perspectives? We must constantly question ourselves, examine our motives, and be open to feedback from others. Otherwise, we risk becoming rigid and dogmatic, blinding ourselves to our own vulnerabilities. So, we've explored how cultivating a long-term vision and aligning actions with core values are essential for building an unmanipulable self, a fortress built on values and vision. This inner strength protects us from manipulation, but even the best intentions can be twisted. At what point does self-defense become manipulation? The line between protecting yourself and exploiting others can be blurry, and it's important to be aware of the potential for unintended consequences. Because here's what they don't want you to realize. Even the most noble strategies can be misused. We are just scratching the surface. In the next section, we will explore how the tools for protecting ourselves can turn us into the very thing we seek to defend against. Stay with me, as we are about to discover what happens when self-defense becomes manipulation. So, we've established how a strong sense of self and a clear long-term vision can fortify you against manipulation. But here's the paradox. Can these very strategies, designed for self-defense, inadvertently turn us into the manipulators we seek to avoid? It seems the line between protecting ourselves and exploiting others is far more precarious than we might like to believe. This brings us to the concept of a spectrum of influence. On one end, we have healthy assertiveness, clearly stating your needs and boundaries, while respecting the needs and boundaries of others. On the other end lies outright manipulation using deception, coercion, or emotional tactics to control or exploit someone for your own gain. But what about the vast gray area in between? When does strategic self-interest cross the line into unethical manipulation? The key lies in intent. Self-defense is driven by a desire to protect oneself from harm, while manipulation is fueled by a desire to control or exploit others. However, even with good intentions, our actions can have unintended consequences. What seems like a justifiable act of self-preservation to one person can easily be perceived as manipulation by another. The person who withholds information to avoid conflict may believe they're protecting themselves from an argument, but the other party may feel deceived and manipulated. Therefore, the ethical question becomes, when does the need to protect ourselves justify potentially harming or deceiving others, even unintentionally? It's a question of balance, a tightrope walk between self-preservation and ethical responsibility. Consider the use of strategic ambiguity. In certain situations, being vague or unclear can be a way to protect your privacy or avoid unnecessary conflict. For instance, you might not want to reveal personal details to a stranger for safety reasons. However, strategic ambiguity can also be used manipulatively. Imagine someone deliberately being vague about their intentions in a business deal to gain an advantage over a competitor. They might hint at certain possibilities without explicitly committing to anything, leaving the other party in a state of uncertainty and making them more likely to agree to unfavorable terms. Now, let's contrast this with someone who outright lies to cause harm. For example, spreading false rumors about a colleague to sabotage their career is a clear act of malicious manipulation. However, the line becomes blurred when someone uses ambiguity to protect their own interests, even if it disadvantages the other party. Is it self-defense or manipulation? Is there really a difference? Another example is feigned weakness. Sometimes, pretending to be less capable or knowledgeable than you are can be a way to avoid being targeted or exploited. A classic example is the Columbo tactic, named after the seemingly bumbling detective who uses his unassuming demeanor to disarm suspects and get them to reveal crucial information. However, feigned weakness can also be used to manipulate others into helping you or lowering their guard. Someone might exaggerate their helplessness to get others to do their work for them, or to avoid taking responsibility for their own actions. Compare this to the story of a bullied child who pretends to be weaker than they are to avoid further attacks. The child's intention is purely self-protective, while the person feigning weakness to exploit others is engaging in manipulation. Yet the outward behavior is remarkably similar. Let's now consider the decisive pause. We've discussed how using a moment of silence to avoid reacting impulsively is a valuable self-defense tactic. But that same pause can be weaponized. A person who uses the decisive pause not to think, but to create anxiety or uncertainty in others, is engaging in manipulation. They might use silence to make someone feel insecure or to pressure them into making a decision they're not comfortable with. Contrast this with someone who physically attacks someone in anger. The intent is clear and the harm is immediate. However, the manipulative use of silence can be more subtle and insidious, leaving the victim feeling confused and powerless. And here's a darker example: gaslighting disguised as self-protection. Gaslighting, as we know, involves distorting reality to make someone doubt their own sanity and experiences. Now, imagine someone using this tactic under the guise of self-protection. They might play dumb to make someone question their own memory or perception of events, all while claiming they're simply trying to avoid conflict or protect themselves from being blamed. For instance, someone might consistently deny having said something, even when confronted with evidence, claiming they don't remember or that the other person is misinterpreting them. They are supposedly protecting themselves from accusations or arguments, but they're actually eroding the other person's sense of reality. The impact is devastating, potentially leading to emotional distress, anxiety, and even mental health problems. These scenarios illustrate how seemingly justifiable tactics can lead to negative outcomes. But what is it that allows us to justify crossing the line? This brings us to a disturbing psychological phenomenon known as moral disengagement. Moral disengagement refers to the psychological mechanisms that allow people to selectively disengage their moral standards in order to justify unethical behavior. It's how we convince ourselves that what we're doing is okay, even when it violates our own values. Rationalization is a key component. We might tell ourselves that our actions are necessary for the greater good, or that the ends justify the means. Minimizing consequences is another tactic. We might downplay the harm caused by our actions or convince ourselves that the victim deserved it. Blaming the victim is yet another way we disengage our moral compass, convincing ourselves that the person we're manipulating is somehow responsible for their own misfortune. But here's what they don't want you to understand. These aren't just abstract concepts. Moral disengagement is often amplified in those who wield considerable power, who may rationalize their manipulative behaviors as necessary for maintaining control or achieving their goals. Think about a CEO who justifies exploiting workers to increase profits, or a politician who justifies spreading misinformation to win an election. They may genuinely believe that their actions are necessary for the greater good, even if they cause harm to others. The long-term implications are alarming. Constant rationalization can erode our ethical boundaries, leading to a pattern of manipulative behavior that becomes increasingly difficult to break. So, we've seen how the line between self-defense and manipulation is often blurry, and how moral disengagement can make it easier to justify unethical behavior. But here's the ultimate test. How can we ensure that we use Machiavellian tactics for self-defense, not for manipulation? What are the key principles that guide us toward ethical and responsible use, especially when faced with the temptation to cross that line? What we'll discover next is even more shocking. Stay with me, because the most effective way to avoid becoming a manipulator may lie in something completely unexpected: empathy. So, we've arrived at a critical juncture. As potent as these Machiavellian strategies are for self-defense, they carry an inherent risk: the ease with which they can slip into unethical manipulation. The very tools designed to protect us can become instruments of exploitation if wielded without restraint. But here's the unsettling truth: understanding how to defend yourself against manipulation isn't enough. You must also understand how to keep from becoming the manipulator. This necessitates what I call an ethical compass, a set of guiding principles to ensure these powerful tactics are employed responsibly and ethically. Think of it as the moral gyroscope that keeps you from spinning out of control when navigating the treacherous waters of human interaction. It's not merely a suggestion, but a fundamental requirement. Without a robust ethical foundation, these techniques become not only dangerous to others but ultimately self-destructive. They can backfire, eroding your relationships, damaging your reputation, and leaving you isolated and distrusted. Let's delve deeper into the three pillars that form the bedrock of this ethical compass. These aren't abstract ideals, but practical guidelines for navigating morally ambiguous situations. They're interconnected, and their combined strength determines the integrity of your actions. The first pillar is transparency with yourself. This goes beyond simple honesty. It demands rigorous self-reflection regarding your motivations and intentions. Ask yourself, are you truly acting in self-defense, or are you subtly seeking to dominate or exploit others? This requires ruthless honesty. Are you protecting yourself from legitimate threats, or are you letting insecurity and ego drive your actions? Consider this. It's easy to rationalize actions, to paint self-serving motives in the garb of self-defense. But consistent self-interrogation is a skill that demands constant diligence. The second pillar is proportionality of response. This principle dictates that your response must be proportionate to the threat you face. Are you using more force than necessary to protect yourself? Escalating a situation unnecessarily is not self-defense. It's aggression. For instance, if someone spreads a minor rumor about you, is it ethical to launch a full-scale smear campaign in retaliation? The answer is almost certainly no. The damage you inflict should never exceed the harm you're trying to prevent. Always consider the potential consequences of your actions and strive for the least harmful, yet effective, response. The third and perhaps most challenging pillar is respect for human dignity. This entails recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of all individuals, even those who may be trying to manipulate you. Are you treating others with respect, even as you defend yourself? Dehumanizing your opponent, seeing them as merely an obstacle to be overcome, is a dangerous path. It justifies all manner of unethical behavior. Even when employing Machiavellian tactics, remember that the other person is still a human being with their own thoughts, feelings, and motivations. Maintaining a degree of empathy, even in conflict, is crucial for preserving your own ethical integrity. Consider these pillars in action. Let's explore some common ethical dilemmas and see how our compass can help us navigate them. Scenario 1. A colleague is spreading rumors about you to undermine your position at work. The ethical dilemma. Do you use strategic ambiguity to counter the rumors, potentially misleading others? Let's consult our compass. Transparency. Are you doing this primarily to protect your reputation or to destroy theirs? Proportionality. Are the rumors seriously damaging your career, or are you simply annoyed? Respect. Are you attacking their character or simply defending your own? The answers to these questions will guide your actions. Perhaps a direct, honest conversation is a more ethical and ultimately more effective approach than resorting to manipulation. Scenario 2. A friend is constantly asking for favors and taking advantage of your generosity. The ethical dilemma. Do you feign weakness to discourage them from asking for more favors? Again, let's consult our compass. Transparency. Are you doing this to set healthy boundaries or to make them feel guilty? Proportionality. Are their requests truly burdensome, or are you simply being selfish? Respect. Are you still treating them with kindness and compassion, even as you say no? It's possible to assert your boundaries without resorting to deception. A simple, honest explanation of your limits may be the most ethical course of action. Scenario 3. In a negotiation, the other party is using manipulative tactics to pressure you into accepting a bad deal. The ethical dilemma. Do you use the decisive pause to stall for time, potentially causing them to lose a valuable opportunity? Ethical compass. Transparency. Are you doing this to get a fair deal or to exploit their desperation? Proportionality. Is the deal truly unfair, or are you simply trying to get the best possible outcome for yourself? Respect. Are you still engaging in good faith negotiation, even as you protect your interests? The decisive pause in this context is not a weapon of aggression, but a shield of self-preservation. These scenarios, drawn from everyday life, highlight the ever-present need for ethical discernment. Now, let's tackle the central paradox. Can a Machiavellian approach truly be ethical? Isn't Machiavellianism inherently about manipulation and power, regardless of the consequences? The disturbing truth is that, yes, there can be an ethical Machiavellianism, but it demands a nuanced understanding. Ethical Machiavellianism is not about being nice or passive. It's about being strong and assertive while remaining true to your values. It's about recognizing that sometimes you must be willing to fight for what you believe in, even if it means using tactics that might be considered unconventional by some. It's about calculated action, strategic thinking, and a willingness to make difficult choices, but always with a clear ethical framework guiding your decisions. And here's what they don't want you to understand. It also requires humility. Recognizing that you are not always right and that others may have valid perspectives is crucial for avoiding the trap of self-righteousness, where the ends justify the means. Remember that there is value in turning the other cheek, where that's the right path. So, an ethical compass is essential for guiding the use of Machiavellian tactics, ensuring they are used for self-defense, not manipulation. But we're just scratching the surface. Mastering these techniques comes with great responsibility. What then are the long-term implications of adopting a Machiavellian mindset, and how can we ensure that we use our power wisely? What we'll uncover next is a final insight even more shocking. True power comes not from controlling others, but from mastering yourself and living in accordance with your values. So, as you can see, we've navigated the labyrinthine world of manipulation, equipping ourselves with the tools to identify and resist its insidious tactics. We've built an ethical framework, a moral compass to guide our actions and prevent us from becoming the very thing we're fighting against. But here's where it gets interesting. Is self-defense the only application of this knowledge? Can the understanding of power dynamics and human nature be used for something more than just protecting ourselves? The truth is, understanding the nature of manipulation doesn't just shield us from harm. It empowers us to act for good in a world rife with deception and exploitation. We can harness this knowledge, this Machiavellian wisdom, to shape a better world, to become a force for positive change. But how? How can we transition from self-preservation to proactive good, using the very tools that are often associated with ruthlessness and self-interest? Let's explore 3 avenues where an ethical Machiavellian approach can be a catalyst for positive transformation. These aren't theoretical concepts. They're practical strategies for leveraging your understanding of human nature to create meaningful change in the world around you. Each of these avenues requires not only a shift from self-preservation to a genuine concern for the well-being of others, but also a willingness to embrace risk and confront opposition. Are you ready to step beyond self-defense and become a force for good? The first avenue is promoting justice and fairness. Think about it. Corruption and injustice often thrive in environments of secrecy and opacity. Manipulators exploit this, using ambiguity and deception to conceal their wrongdoing. But an ethical Machiavellian can use these same tactics to expose corruption and advocate for the marginalized. How? By strategically gathering evidence, feigning weakness to lull the powerful into a false sense of security, and then using the decisive pause to carefully time their revelations, maximizing impact and minimizing personal risk. It's about using the tools of deception to reveal the truth, to shine a light on the darkness, and to create a more just and equitable world. The second avenue is building stronger communities. Consider this. Human nature is complex, a tapestry of cooperation and conflict. Manipulators exploit our vulnerabilities, sowing division and discord to achieve their own selfish ends. But an ethical Machiavellian can apply their understanding of human nature to inspire cooperation, resolve conflicts, and create a shared vision. How? By understanding the motivations and needs of different groups, by identifying common ground, and by skillfully navigating the dynamics of power. They might even feign weakness to make others feel powerful, all the while strategically guiding the group towards a common goal. This isn't about manipulating people into doing what you want. It's about empowering them to work together for the greater good, to build communities that are resilient, inclusive, and thriving. The third avenue is leading with integrity. Think about the kind of influence political leaders and corporations yield. Conventional leadership often relies on charisma, authority, or fear to motivate followers. Manipulators exploit this, using empty promises and emotional appeals to gain power and control. But an ethical Machiavellian can combine a long-term vision with ethical principles to build trust, inspire followers, and create a positive impact. How? By being transparent about their intentions, by acting with integrity, and by consistently putting the needs of others before their own. It's about leading by example, about demonstrating that power can be used for good, and about creating a legacy of positive change. Let's bring these avenues to life with some real-world examples of ethical Machiavellianism in action. These aren't just hypothetical scenarios. They're stories of individuals who have used their understanding of power dynamics to make a real difference in the world. Do they inspire you? Do they make you see that Machiavellian principles can be for good? Consider a whistleblower who uncovers evidence of corporate wrongdoing. Rather than immediately going public, they use strategic ambiguity to gather more evidence, carefully documenting the extent of the corruption. They feign compliance to avoid raising suspicion, all the while building a case that is irrefutable. Then, using the decisive pause, they carefully time their revelation, choosing the moment when it will have the greatest impact and the least personal risk. Is this manipulation? Perhaps. But is it also ethical? Absolutely. Or consider a community organizer working to address poverty in a struggling neighborhood. They understand that different groups, residents, business owners, politicians, have competing interests and priorities. Rather than trying to force their own agenda, they use their understanding of human psychology to bring these groups together, facilitating dialogue, identifying common ground, and building a shared vision for the future. They may even feign weakness, allowing others to take the lead, all the while strategically guiding the conversation towards a positive outcome. Is this manipulation? Perhaps. But is it also effective? Undeniably. And then there's a political leader who inherits a country plagued by corruption and inequality. Rather than resorting to authoritarian tactics, they combine a clear long-term vision for their country with a steadfast commitment to ethical principles. They are transparent about their intentions, they act with integrity, and they consistently put the needs of their citizens before their own. They inspire trust, they build a broad coalition of support, and they create a legacy of positive change. Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, is a prime example of this approach. Did she have to be Machiavellian to achieve her aims? We can only imagine the compromises and decisions that had to be made. But here's the crucial point. The same tactics can be used for good or for ill, depending on the intent and values of the individual. A corrupt politician can use strategic ambiguity to conceal their wrongdoing, while an ethical whistleblower can use it to expose corruption. A manipulative leader can exploit fear and division to gain power, while an ethical community organizer can use their understanding of human psychology to build bridges and foster cooperation. The difference lies not in the tactics themselves, but in the intentions behind them. So, what are the implications of using Machiavellian wisdom for positive change? It requires a deep understanding of power dynamics, a willingness to take risks, and an unwavering commitment to ethical principles. It demands humility, recognizing that even the best intentions can have unintended consequences, and that constant self-reflection is necessary to stay on the right path. Here's what those in power don't want you to realize. Those who understand manipulation have a duty to use their knowledge to protect the vulnerable and promote a more just and equitable world. This isn't just about self-interest. It's about recognizing the responsibility that comes with knowledge and using your power to create a better future for all. But there are long-term impacts, positive and negative, for those who choose to walk this path. How do we reconcile the need for strategic action with the importance of ethical integrity? Thus far, we've seen a journey from self-defense to proactive good. This ethical Machiavellian approach requires a synthesis of tactical skill, ethical awareness, and a commitment to serving others. How can we reconcile the seemingly contradictory ideas of Machiavellianism and ethics? How can we ensure that our pursuit of positive change doesn't lead us down a path of unintended consequences? And here's the ultimate revelation. True power comes not from dominating others, but from empowering them and creating a world where everyone can thrive. But is this even possible? We've armed ourselves with the Machiavellian playbook, a system not for ruthless conquest but for vigilant self-defense. Remember, understanding the game is half the battle, but there's a crucial preliminary step, a foundation upon which all effective resistance is built: self-awareness. And here lies a critical, often overlooked truth. The most cunning manipulators exploit not just our ignorance, but our own hidden vulnerabilities. But what does it truly mean to know thyself in the context of manipulation? It's not simply about listing your strengths and weaknesses. It's about identifying the specific psychological levers that others can pull to control your actions. It's about recognizing the hidden doors in your psyche that can be opened by a well-placed word, a subtle gesture, or a calculated appeal to your deepest desires and fears. Consider this. Are you truly an impenetrable fortress, or do you possess vulnerabilities that can be exploited? This leads us to a challenging but essential exercise, a proactive self-assessment, a deep dive into the hidden corners of your mind. This isn't about dwelling on your flaws. It's about understanding the terrain so that you can anticipate and counter manipulation attempts before they even begin. It's about becoming a master strategist in the war for your own mind. But where do we even begin? What are the common vulnerabilities that make us susceptible to manipulation? Let's explore some of the most common psychological vulnerabilities. Consider this a toolkit for self-reflection, a guide to identifying the chinks in your armor. It's crucial to remember that these aren't character flaws. They're simply aspects of human nature that manipulators can exploit. By understanding them, you can begin to fortify your mind and protect yourself from undue influence. But what are these vulnerabilities, and how do they make us susceptible to manipulation? First, there's the need for approval, that deep-seated desire to be liked, accepted, and validated by others. Manipulators exploit this vulnerability by withholding approval, threatening rejection, or showering you with praise only to later withdraw it. Think about it. How often do you find yourself agreeing with others, even when you disagree, just to avoid conflict or maintain a sense of belonging? How easily can someone make you feel guilty or ashamed if you don't meet their expectations? Manipulators weaponize this desire, turning your need for connection into a tool for control. Second, we must consider the fear of conflict. Many people avoid confrontation at all costs, preferring to acquiesce rather than engage in arguments. Manipulators exploit this by creating conflict, threatening to do so, or simply making unreasonable demands that you're hesitant to challenge. Consider a passive-aggressive family member. Do you find yourself agreeing to things you don't want to do just to keep the peace? Are you willing to sacrifice your own needs and boundaries to avoid an uncomfortable conversation? Manipulators thrive on this fear, turning your desire for harmony into a source of power over you. Then, there's empathy and guilt. The capacity to feel others' emotions is a beautiful thing, but it can also be a significant vulnerability. Manipulators exploit this by playing the victim, evoking sympathy, or laying guilt trips on you. Have you ever found yourself doing something you didn't want to do because you felt sorry for someone else? How often do you feel responsible for other people's happiness or well-being? Manipulators prey on this empathy, turning your compassion into a tool for emotional blackmail. Next, there is the lack of assertiveness. Many people struggle to express their own needs and boundaries, leading them to be taken advantage of. Manipulators exploit this by ignoring boundaries, making unreasonable requests, or simply steamrolling over your objections. Think of that colleague who always asks for favors. Do you find yourself constantly saying yes to requests, even when you're already overwhelmed? Are you afraid to stand up for yourself or say no to others? Manipulators exploit this passivity, turning your silence into a license to exploit. Finally, perhaps the most insidious vulnerability is overconfidence and arrogance. The belief in one's own invincibility, that "it can't happen to me" mentality, can lead to overlooking manipulation attempts. Manipulators exploit this by appealing to your ego, flattering you, or creating situations where you feel like you're in control, when in reality, you're being subtly led astray. This also includes a perceived level of intelligence. Do you believe that you're too smart to be manipulated? Are you so convinced of your own judgment that you dismiss warning signs or ignore dissenting opinions? Manipulators love to target those with inflated egos, turning your pride into a blind spot. Let's consider some concrete examples of these vulnerabilities being exploited throughout history and in our everyday lives. Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France, desperately sought the approval of the public. This made her vulnerable to manipulation by courtiers and advisors who played on her desire to be liked, ultimately leading to disastrous political decisions and her downfall. Her need for validation blinded her to the growing discontent among the French people, setting the stage for the French Revolution. Or consider Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister who desperately sought to avoid conflict with Nazi Germany. His fear of confrontation led him to appease Hitler through the Munich Agreement, a decision that ultimately emboldened the dictator and paved the way for World War II. Chamberlain's desire for peace blinded him to Hitler's true intentions, resulting in catastrophic consequences for the world. Let's bring it closer to home. Think about a personal relationship where one partner constantly uses guilt trips and emotional blackmail to control the other. If you really loved me, you would. Or, after everything I've done for you. These are classic manipulation tactics that exploit empathy and create a cycle of obligation and resentment. How many people do you know trapped in such a relationship? Or, in a business context, consider an employee who is constantly assigned extra work and overlooked for promotions because they lack assertiveness. Their inability to say no or stand up for themselves leads to burnout and resentment, while their manipulative colleagues reap the rewards. This is far more common than many realize. Then there's the overconfident entrepreneur who dismisses warning signs and invests everything in a risky venture, only to lose it all. Their arrogance blinds them to the dangers, leading to financial ruin. The higher you rise, the further you can fall. The implications of identifying these personal vulnerabilities are profound. Awareness is not just half the battle. It's the first step toward mitigating their impact and developing counter-strategies. This knowledge informs the opponent analysis stage of the Machiavellian playbook. Understanding your vulnerabilities helps you anticipate how manipulators will target you, allowing you to prepare your defenses. It's about developing specific strategies to address each vulnerability. Practicing assertiveness techniques, setting clear boundaries, challenging your need for approval, these are all essential tools in your anti-manipulation arsenal. Remind yourself that it is okay to disagree. It is akano, say no. It is okay to protect your own interests. It is these walls that protect your mind from intruders. Think back to the manipulative tactics we discussed earlier: gaslighting, projection, triangulation. How do these tactics exploit the vulnerabilities we've just explored? Gaslighting preys on your self-doubt, making you question your own sanity. Projection exploits your empathy, making you feel responsible for the manipulator's problems. Triangulation exploits your need for approval, creating a sense of competition and insecurity. So, where does this leave us? We've identified the key vulnerabilities that make us susceptible to manipulation. We've seen how these vulnerabilities can be exploited in history, in our relationships, and in our own lives. Now, the question becomes, how do we defend against them? How do we build mental resilience and protect ourselves from undue influence? Is this even possible? Let's now consider the specific techniques for countering each vulnerability and building mental resilience. For the most effective defense against manipulation lies not just in awareness, but in developing practical strategies to fortify your mind and protect your boundaries. What are the secrets to creating an impenetrable fortress of the mind? We've identified the chinks in our armor, those vulnerabilities that manipulators seek to exploit. But recognizing these weak points is merely the first step. Now, let's delve deeper into the active implementation phase of our Machiavellian playbook, building mental fortresses, developing counter tactics specifically designed to address each vulnerability. This isn't about passively acknowledging your weaknesses. It's about proactively arming yourself with the psychological tools to neutralize manipulation attempts before they take hold. How do we transform awareness into practical, unshakable defense? Let's construct our vulnerability shield, examining specific counter tactics to safeguard our minds. First, let's address the need for approval. The counter here lies in cultivating internal validation. What does this mean? It's learning to value your own opinions and accomplishments, independent of external validation. It's understanding that your worth isn't determined by the praise or criticism of others. It's about finding happiness and contentment within yourself, regardless of external circumstances. This is built on the foundation of self-acceptance, recognizing that you are inherently valuable, imperfections and all. Second, to counter the fear of conflict, we need assertive communication training. This involves developing the skills to express your needs and boundaries effectively and confidently. It's about learning to say no without guilt or apology. It's about addressing conflicts constructively, focusing on finding mutually agreeable solutions rather than avoiding confrontation altogether. It means communicating your boundaries without aggression, but with unwavering clarity. As the saying goes, no is a complete sentence. Third, to defend against the manipulation that comes from excessive empathy and guilt, we need emotional regulation and boundary setting. This means recognizing and managing your emotions, particularly empathy and guilt, so they don't become weapons against you. It's about setting healthy boundaries, both physical and emotional, and enforcing them consistently. It means avoiding responsibility for other people's feelings, and understanding that you are not obligated to sacrifice your own well-being for their sake. It's about being empathetic without being manipulated. Can you show compassion without enabling abuse? Fourth, against a lack of assertiveness, the counter tactic is self-advocacy techniques. This involves learning to stand up for your rights, express your opinions confidently, and challenge unfair treatment. It's about becoming your own advocate, both in your personal and professional life. This means knowing your worth, understanding your rights, and being willing to fight for them. Are you selling yourself short in your career? Are you allowing others to walk all over you in your relationships? Finally, to counter overconfidence and arrogance, we must cultivate intellectual humility. This means recognizing the limits of your knowledge, seeking diverse perspectives, and being open to feedback and criticism. It's understanding that you don't have all the answers and that you can always learn something from others. It's about being willing to admit when you're wrong and being open to changing your mind in the face of new evidence. And isn't it interesting that this very humility often increases wisdom? Let's bring these counter tactics to life with real-world examples. Consider Sarah, who spent years seeking constant validation from her boss. She worked tirelessly, always striving to exceed expectations, but never feeling truly appreciated. One day, she decided to shift her focus inward, taking pride in her work for its own sake and setting her personal bar for success. As she stopped relying on her boss's approval, she gained greater confidence and resilience. Now, she readily welcomes constructive criticism, but ignores the typical micromanagement. Imagine a scenario where assertive communication diffuses a potentially explosive situation. Two colleagues, John and Mike, are constantly clashing over project responsibilities. John, who previously avoided confrontation, decides to assertively express his needs and boundaries. He calmly explains his workload, clearly defines his responsibilities, and respectfully declines additional tasks that fall outside his purview. Mike, initially taken aback, recognizes the validity of John's concerns and agrees to redistribute the workload more equitably. The project continues with reduced conflict. Consider the example of a woman, Emily, who consistently felt guilty for not meeting the demands of her friends and family. She would constantly overextend herself, sacrificing her own needs and well-being to please others. Through setting healthy boundaries and learning to say no, Emily protected herself from emotional manipulation. She could now offer genuine compassion without enabling abuse, carefully weighing the needs of others against her own well-being. Then there's the story of David, who, for years, was overlooked for promotions at work because he lacked assertiveness. He was hesitant to speak up in meetings or advocate for his own ideas. One day, he decided to take a leap of faith. He began actively participating in meetings, confidently expressing his opinions and advocating for his contributions. To his surprise, his colleagues and superiors responded positively. He was eventually recognized for his hard work and promoted to a higher position. Finally, consider the seasoned CEO who believed his years of experience gave him all the answers. He rarely sought advice from others, dismissing dissenting opinions as naive or ill-informed. When his company faced a major crisis, his overconfidence blinded him to the advice of his executive team. Only through the humility of listening to the team's concerns did the company avert disaster. The combined impact of these counter tactics is transformative. They foster greater autonomy, resilience, and emotional intelligence. They empower you to navigate challenging situations with confidence and integrity, protecting your mental well-being in the long term. But remember, these techniques require consistent practice and refinement to become ingrained habits. You must actively cultivate these skills, day in and day out, to truly master them. The more skilled you are, the more easily you will recognize the manipulative tactics of others. But here's the twist. What they don't want you to know is that constant vigilance can lead to paranoia. How can you implement these counter tactics without becoming overly distrustful or cynical? Stay with me, because a healthy balance of self-protection and trust is essential for building meaningful relationships and navigating the world with confidence. How do you avoid becoming the very thing you are trying to protect yourself from? The more skilled you are at recognizing the manipulative tactics of others, the more easily you will be able to defend yourself. But here's the paradox. Developing such strong defenses against manipulation can inadvertently lead to distrust and cynicism, damaging relationships and potentially hindering new opportunities. How do you avoid becoming overly distrustful or cynical, the very thing you're trying to protect yourself from? We're now walking a trust tightrope. The key to navigating this tightrope is finding the balance between healthy skepticism and genuine openness to connection and collaboration. This isn't just some philosophical ideal. It's an essential skill for long-term well-being and success, requiring us to navigate the world with both awareness and a degree of optimism. But how do we define this balance? What does healthy skepticism look like in practice? And how does it differ from the corrosive effects of destructive cynicism? Let's start by understanding the characteristics of healthy skepticism. It begins with questioning assumptions and seeking evidence before accepting claims, not blindly accepting everything at face value. It involves recognizing potential biases and hidden motivations in others, understanding that everyone has their own agenda. However, it's crucial to maintain a critical perspective without necessarily assuming malice, giving people the benefit of the doubt until there's clear evidence to the contrary. And crucially, it requires being open to changing your mind when presented with new information, avoiding rigid adherence to preconceived notions. This is not the same as the destructive alternative. Now, contrast these with the characteristics of destructive cynicism. This manifests as assuming the worst about others' intentions and motives, seeing every action as self-serving or manipulative. It involves dismissing positive or altruistic behavior as naive or misguided, refusing to believe that anyone can act out of genuine kindness or compassion. Destructive cynicism means rejecting new ideas or possibilities without proper consideration, clinging to a negative worldview, and dismissing anything that challenges it. Ultimately, it means holding a consistently negative and pessimistic outlook on life, seeing the world as a bleak and hostile place. Healthy skepticism is a tool for discernment, allowing us to make informed decisions, while cynicism is a self-imposed prison, limiting our experiences and isolating us from others. The consequences of hypervigilance and the benefits of balanced trust are profound. Consider a business leader who is so paranoid about being betrayed by their employees that they micromanage every detail, stifling creativity and driving away talent. How does their business suffer? Innovation is crushed, morale plummets, and the company ultimately fails to reach its full potential. The leader's fear, while perhaps rooted in past experiences, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, creating the very betrayal they sought to avoid. Then there's the person who has been hurt in past relationships and becomes so guarded that they are unable to form new connections, leading to loneliness and isolation. How did this person get to this point? A cycle of pain and fear reinforces itself, creating a fortress around their heart that no one can penetrate. The very thing they desire, connection and love, remains perpetually out of reach. Contrast these with scenarios where appropriate skepticism helped avoid manipulation or bad decisions. Imagine someone who questioned a too-good-to-be-true investment offer, recognizing the red flags of a Ponzi scheme before losing their life savings. Or someone who recognized red flags in a potential romantic partner, avoiding a toxic and abusive relationship. What are some of these red flags? Excessive flattery, isolating you from friends and family, or pressuring you into making quick decisions. These are all signs that someone may not have your best interests at heart. These examples highlight how Machiavellian techniques often rely on exploiting a lack of discernment. A manipulator might use excessive flattery to disarm a vulnerable target or create a false sense of trust to gain influence. Similarly, they might exploit someone's fear of missing out to pressure them into making a hasty decision. Finding a healthy balance brings improved relationships, better decision-making, and a more positive outlook on life. Calibrating your trust, adjusting your level of openness based on the specific situation and the person involved is key. Give people the benefit of the doubt while remaining vigilant. Trust, but verify, as the saying goes. Cynicism might seem smart, a shield against disappointment, but it often just imprisons you, preventing you from experiencing the joy and fulfillment that come from genuine connection. So, we've established that balancing self-protection with trust requires a combination of healthy skepticism and a willingness to be open to connection. But what about those gut feelings we can't explain? How reliable is our intuition in detecting deception, and can it be a valuable tool in our Machiavellian playbook? The most effective defense against manipulation may lie not just in logic and analysis, but in trusting your inner voice and cultivating self-trust. Stay with me, because we're about to enter the realm of the sixth sense. So, can we really trust our gut? Is that flutter in our stomach a reliable signal, or just indigestion masquerading as insight? We've armed ourselves with logic, strategy, and a healthy dose of skepticism. But what if there's another tool at our disposal, a whisper from our subconscious that can help us detect deception? This isn't about abandoning reason, but expanding our toolkit, learning to listen to that inner voice while remaining grounded in reality. The promise here is to understand how to decipher those often subtle signals, potentially unlocking a powerful defense against manipulation. But what exactly is intuition? It's more than just a vague hunch or a feeling we can't explain. Intuition is a subconscious cognitive process, a rapid synthesis of past experiences, observations, and subtle cues that form a holistic judgment or insight. Think of it as your brain's background processor, constantly crunching data and identifying patterns below the level of conscious awareness. This isn't some mystical ability. It's a neurological function, a sophisticated form of pattern recognition that can provide quick assessments in situations where logical analysis is too slow, incomplete, or simply impossible. Imagine trying to consciously analyze every facial expression, every micro-movement, every subtle shift in tone during a tense negotiation. You'd be overwhelmed. Intuition allows us to bypass this conscious overload, providing a shortcut to understanding. Now, it's important to differentiate intuition from simple gut feelings, which can often be based on emotions, biases, or even indigestion, as we initially joked. Intuition involves the brain's ability to process information non-consciously, drawing connections that conscious thought might miss. It's about recognizing subtle cues and patterns based on prior experience. Gut feelings, on the other hand, might stem from fear, anxiety, or pre-existing prejudices. So, how can we tell the difference? Intuition often feels like a quiet knowing, a sense of certainty that arises without conscious deliberation, while gut feelings tend to be more emotionally charged and may be accompanied by physical sensations like butterflies in your stomach or a racing heart. One is a whisper, the other is a shout. Consider the high-stakes world of emergency medicine, where doctors often have to make split-second decisions based on incomplete information. Years of experience allow them to develop a strong sense of intuition, enabling them to quickly diagnose patients and initiate treatment even before all the test results are in. Think of an experienced detective who can walk into a crime scene and immediately sense that something is off, even if there's no obvious evidence to support their suspicion. These examples highlight the value of intuition in situations where time is of the essence and logical analysis is insufficient. What separates them from a lucky guess is the basis in learned experience. But can we trust these feelings? Let's look at some examples. A former security expert, Gavin de Becker, details in his book The Gift of Fear how he relied on his intuition to identify potential security breaches and threats, even when logical evidence was inconclusive. In one instance, he felt uneasy about a seemingly harmless individual who had gained access to a secure facility. Despite lacking concrete proof, de Becker trusted his gut and initiated a discreet investigation, which ultimately revealed the individual's intent to sabotage the facility. What would have happened if he ignored that feeling? Then, there's Steve Jobs, known for his unwavering belief in his intuition when it came to product development. Against the advice of market research and focus groups, he often followed his gut instincts, leading to the creation of groundbreaking products like the iPhone and the iPad. Jobs famously said, "Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice." Was this arrogance or a deep understanding of his own intuition? Even in mythology and literature, we find examples of intuition at play. Sherlock Holmes, though known for his deductive reasoning, often relied on hunches and gut feelings to guide his investigations, piecing together seemingly disparate clues to form a coherent picture. Consider Spider-Man's Spidey Sense, a fictionalized but compelling representation of how intuition can provide a warning signal in the face of danger. What do these examples tell us about the power of our subconscious? However, it's crucial to acknowledge the limitations of intuition. It's not infallible, and it can be easily influenced by biases, emotions, and a lack of experience. If you've had a negative experience with a particular type of person, your intuition might lead you to distrust anyone who resembles them, regardless of their actual intentions. So, while intuition can be a valuable tool, it's essential to verify intuitive insights with logical analysis and critical thinking. It is not a crystal ball. Relying solely on intuition can lead to rash decisions and inaccurate judgments. Imagine making investment decisions based purely on a feeling, without conducting proper research, or accusing someone of wrongdoing without any concrete evidence. The consequences could be disastrous. The key is to use intuition as a starting point for investigation, a hypothesis to be tested, not as a substitute for evidence-based decision-making. Use logic, but don't ignore that feeling in your gut. Remember, Machiavelli himself stressed the importance of careful observation and analysis, not just blind faith. So, intuition can be a valuable tool for detecting deception, but it's important to understand its limitations and use it responsibly, balancing it with logic and critical thinking. But what happens when self-doubt creeps in, undermining our ability to trust our intuition? How can we distinguish between genuine intuition and the distorted signals of paranoia or anxiety? Because what we'll discover is that the most effective way to cultivate reliable intuition is to develop self-trust and emotional stability, allowing you to hear your inner voice clearly without distortion. Stay with me, because we're about to delve into the shadow of self-doubt and how it can cloud our inner vision. We've established the potential of intuition as a defense, a subtle alarm system alerting us to manipulation. But what happens when that alarm system malfunctions, when static interferes with the signal? The unsettling truth is that one of the most effective tools in a manipulator's arsenal isn't external trickery, but internal sabotage, the insidious poison of self-doubt. It's one thing to be deceived by someone else, but far more disorienting to be deceived by yourself. Self-doubt, in this context, isn't simply a healthy dose of humility or a moment of introspection. It's a weapon turned inward. Think of it as a persistent, undermining voice that casts a shadow over every instinct, every feeling, every decision. It works by eroding your faith in your own perceptions. Did I really see that, or am I imagining things? Am I overreacting? Maybe they're right and I'm just being paranoid. It magnifies the fear of being wrong, of appearing foolish, of standing alone against the crowd. When you're caught in its grip, even the clearest intuitive signals become blurred, distorted, and ultimately dismissed. It's a subtle but powerful form of gaslighting, but one you inflict upon yourself. The psychological impact of this self-inflicted manipulation is profound. It breeds anxiety, insecurity, and a pervasive sense of helplessness. You begin to question your memories, your judgments, your very sanity. Healthy self-reflection becomes a minefield of second-guessing, where every step forward is met with a chorus of internal objections. There's a line where introspection stops being helpful and starts harming, and manipulators know exactly how to push you across it. They sow the seeds of doubt, then stand back and watch as you dismantle your own defenses. It is important to distinguish between valid intuitive signals and the noise of self-doubt. Have you ever found yourself second-guessing your initial instincts, only to realize later that your gut was right all along? Consider, for a moment, the examples we discussed earlier, those moments of intuition that shaped history, business, and personal lives. Now, imagine what would have happened if self-doubt had taken hold in those situations. What if Gavin de Becker had dismissed his unease as paranoia, ignoring the subtle cues that warned him of the potential security breach? What if Steve Jobs had allowed market research and focus groups to drown out his inner voice, leading him to abandon his vision for the iPhone? How different would the world be today? Let's bring this closer to home. Imagine a woman in a relationship who feels uneasy about her partner's behavior. He's constantly putting her down, isolating her from her friends and family, and making her question her own reality. Her gut screams that something is wrong, that she's being manipulated. But then the self-doubt creeps in. Am I being too sensitive? Maybe I'm just imagining things. He says he loves me, so I must be misunderstanding him. Slowly, insidiously, her intuition is silenced, and she becomes trapped in a cycle of abuse, convinced that she's the one at fault. This is the devastating power of self-doubt fueling manipulation. Or consider a junior employee with a nagging feeling that a project is deeply flawed. They see warning signs that others are missing, their intuition screaming that this project will fail. but they hesitate to speak up. Who am I to question my boss? They think. They have so much more experience. I must be missing something. They bury their concerns, the project fails spectacularly, and the company suffers the consequences. The whispers of intuition were there, but self-doubt rendered them inaudible. Even on a grand scale, unchecked self-doubt can lead to catastrophe. Imagine a leader on the brink of a critical decision, a decision that could determine the fate of a nation. Their intuition tells them to trust one path, to heed a particular warning, but their advisors, with their polished arguments and persuasive rhetoric, sow seeds of doubt. Are you sure about this? They ask. The data suggests otherwise. Are you willing to risk everything on a hunch? The leader, plagued by self-doubt, ignores their gut feeling, makes the wrong choice, and plunges the nation into chaos. The implications of unchecked self-doubt are clear. It leaves you vulnerable, exposed, disarmed in the face of manipulation. It undermines your autonomy, your ability to make decisions that are truly your own. A manipulator knows that if they can get you to question yourself, they've already won half the battle. They reinforce negative beliefs, undermine your confidence, and create a sense of dependency, making you reliant on their guidance and expertise. How many times have you deferred to someone else's judgment, only to regret it later? So, how do we reclaim our inner voice? How do we silence the insidious whispers of self-doubt? The answer lies in cultivating a practice of self-awareness and self-compassion. One powerful technique is cognitive restructuring, actively challenging negative thoughts and replacing them with more positive and realistic ones. When you hear that voice telling you, you're not good enough, challenge it. Ask yourself, is that really true? What evidence do I have to support that belief? Reframe the thought in a more positive light. I may not be perfect, but I'm capable and I'm learning. Another essential practice is self-compassion, treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a friend. When you make a mistake, don't beat yourself up. Acknowledge the mistake, learn from it, and move on. Remember, everyone makes mistakes. It's part of being human. Show yourself some grace. Finally, cultivate mindfulness through meditation. By observing your thoughts and emotions without judgment, you can learn to recognize the patterns of self-doubt and prevent them from consuming you. You can create a space between yourself and your thoughts, a space where you can choose how to respond, rather than being swept away by the tide of negativity. Remember, Machiavelli understood the power of controlling one's internal state. These techniques can help you reclaim your inner voice and fortify yourself from manipulation. What would your life look like if you trusted yourself more? We've seen how self-doubt can distort intuition and make you vulnerable to manipulation, and how specific techniques can quiet your inner critic and reclaim your inner voice. So how do we take this further? How do we build that self-trust, that unwavering belief in our own judgment? And what if the key to resisting manipulation lies not just in quieting self-doubt, but in actively cultivating self-reliance and affirming our own intuitive wisdom? Stay with me, because the most effective way to protect yourself from manipulation is to cultivate a strong sense of self-worth. Self-doubt, as we've seen, is the manipulator's greatest ally, a weapon turned inward that sabotages your intuition. But what if the antidote isn't simply quieting that inner critic, but actively building an unwavering belief in your own judgment? Imagine a life where your decisions are guided by inner conviction, where external pressures and manipulative tactics simply slide off a shield forged from self-trust. Self-trust isn't some innate trait bestowed upon a chosen few. It's a skill, a muscle that can be developed and strengthened through consistent practice. Think of it as reclaiming your inner authority, wresting control from the voices that seek to undermine you and placing it firmly in your own hands. What would it feel like to move through the world with that kind of unwavering self-assurance? The journey begins with understanding and cultivating the core pillars of self-trust. So let's delve deeper into the pillars upon which we can rebuild our inner authority, fortifying ourselves against manipulation. The first pillar is acknowledging and validating your emotions. This means recognizing that your feelings are real, that they provide valuable information about yourself and the world around you. How often do we dismiss our emotions as irrational, as weaknesses to be suppressed? We're taught to prioritize logic and reason above all else, but our emotions are not our enemies. They're messengers. Think of your emotions as an internal compass, guiding you towards what feels safe, authentic, and aligned with your values, and away from what feels threatening, manipulative, or false. When you feel unease in a situation, that's your intuition trying to tell you something. Don't dismiss it, don't ignore it, but investigate it. Ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What needs are not being met? What boundaries are being crossed? The second pillar of self-trust is setting and enforcing boundaries. This is about defining what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior from others, and consistently upholding those boundaries, even when it's difficult or unpopular. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are lines that define where you begin and where another person ends. They are essential for maintaining healthy relationships and protecting yourself from manipulation. How often do you find yourself saying yes when you really want to say no, simply to avoid conflict or please someone else? When you lack clear boundaries, you become a target for manipulators. They will exploit your desire to be liked, your fear of rejection, your need for approval, and slowly erode your sense of self. By setting and enforcing boundaries, you send a clear message that you value yourself, that you respect your own needs, and that you will not tolerate being taken advantage of. The third pillar is acting in alignment with your values. This means making decisions that are consistent with your core beliefs and principles, even when it's difficult or unpopular. What do you stand for? What do you believe in? What principles guide your actions? These are the questions you must answer to build a strong sense of self-trust. It is easy to get caught up in the pursuit of external rewards, like money, status, or approval. It is easy to compromise your values for the sake of expediency or personal gain. But when you act against your values, you erode your self-respect and weaken your inner authority. The fourth pillar is practicing self-compassion. This means treating yourself with kindness, understanding, and forgiveness, especially when you make mistakes or experience setbacks. So often, we are our own harshest critics, holding ourselves to impossible standards and beating ourselves up for every perceived failure. But self-compassion is not self-pity. It is not about making excuses for your behavior or letting yourself off the hook. It's about acknowledging your imperfections, accepting your humanity, and treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a friend. These pillars aren't just nice-sounding concepts. They are direct counters to the tactics manipulators use to exploit vulnerability. Manipulators thrive on emotional confusion, boundary violations, value compromises, and self-criticism. By cultivating self-trust, you rob them of their power and build a fortress around your inner self. How can these concepts be applied in the real world? Consider the story of a young woman named Sarah, who struggled with people-pleasing and often found herself in manipulative relationships. She began practicing the first pillar, acknowledging and validating her emotions. She started paying attention to the physical sensations she experienced in her body when someone made her uncomfortable. She learned to trust those signals, even when she couldn't articulate exactly what was wrong. This allowed her to make better decisions. One day, a colleague asked her to take on extra work, even though she was already overwhelmed. Instead of automatically saying, yes, she paused, acknowledged her feeling of resentment, and politely declined, explaining that she needed to prioritize her existing commitments. This simple act of self-validation empowered her to set a boundary and protect her well-being. Or take the example of a businessman named David, who was constantly being pressured to compromise his values for the sake of profit. He ran a sustainable clothing company, and his investors were urging him to cut costs by using cheaper, unethical materials. David practiced the third pillar, acting in alignment with his values. Despite the financial pressure, he refused to compromise his commitment to sustainability. He stood his ground, even when it meant potentially losing his investors. In the end, his integrity earned him the respect of his customers, attracted new investors who shared his values, and built a strong, sustainable business. Now, consider the story of Abraham Lincoln, who led the United States through its most tumultuous period. Lincoln was a master of self-trust, particularly when it came to acting in alignment with his values. Despite facing immense pressure from both sides of the slavery debate, he remained steadfast in his commitment to preserving the Union and ultimately abolishing slavery. He understood the importance of setting and enforcing boundaries. Lincoln's unwavering self-belief, rooted in his values and sense of purpose, enabled him to make difficult decisions and lead the nation through a time of unprecedented crisis. These pillars are not isolated strategies. They are interconnected, reinforcing each other in a virtuous cycle. When you acknowledge and validate your emotions, you gain clarity about your needs and values. This clarity empowers you to set stronger boundaries and make decisions that are aligned with your authentic self. As you act in alignment with your values, you build self-respect and confidence, which further strengthens your self-trust. And when you practice self-compassion, you become more resilient in the face of setbacks, allowing you to continue growing and evolving. This virtuous cycle creates a powerful shield against manipulation. Cultivating self-trust yields greater resilience, improved decision-making, healthier relationships, and a stronger sense of purpose. Building self-trust is a continuous process, requiring ongoing effort, self-reflection, and commitment. Self-reliance makes you less dependent on the validation of others. We've seen how self-doubt makes us vulnerable to manipulation, and how self-trust can be a shield. But how does this all come together in our Machiavellian playbook? How do you bring all of these concepts together to protect yourself from manipulation? Self-trust is not just a defense against manipulation, but the foundation for authentic power and a fulfilling life. The next step is to integrate these strategies with Machiavelli's principles. How do you take self-trust and use it to become a more cunning, strategic, and ultimately protected individual? We've established that self-trust acts as a formidable defense against manipulation, equipping you to navigate the treacherous landscape of human interaction. But here's a subtle danger, a siren song that can lead even the most vigilant astray: the temptation to over-intellectualize the Machiavellian playbook, to reduce people to predictable algorithms, to see them as mere chess pieces to be strategically maneuvered. Are you truly more protected if you see everyone as predictable? This mindset, while seemingly empowering, is not only counterproductive but ethically dubious. It creates a dangerous paradox. In your quest to understand and defend against manipulation, you risk becoming a manipulator yourself. The very act of reducing people to equations, of stripping them of their inherent complexity and humanity, opens the door to exploitation. But is there a way to protect yourself without slipping into the darkness? The real trap lies in seeing the world as a game to be won, rather than a complex tapestry of human interactions. The key to avoiding this trap is to embrace the human factor, to recognize the inherent complexity, unpredictability, and above all, the humanity of those around you. Are you willing to accept that people will behave unexpectedly? Human behavior is rarely as predictable as we might like to believe. Individuals are not simply rational actors, responding to stimuli in a calculated, linear fashion. Emotions, biases, unforeseen circumstances, and a myriad of other factors constantly influence their decisions and actions, rendering any attempt at perfect prediction ultimately futile. Think about it. How often have you yourself acted in ways that defied logic or reason, driven by impulses, emotions, or subconscious desires? This inherent unpredictability exposes the limitations of opponent analysis. People are not static entities. Their motivations and tactics can shift and evolve over time, often in surprising ways. The person you believe you have figured out today may present an entirely different face tomorrow, driven by new experiences, changed circumstances, or simply a shift in perspective. Can you truly account for every variable in the equation of human behavior? Moreover, attempting to rigidly categorize and predict others can blind you to their true nature and potential, leading to miscalculations and missed opportunities. And here's where empathy becomes essential. Recognizing the inherent humanity in others, even those who may be trying to manipulate you, is not a sign of weakness, but a source of strength. Empathy allows you to see beyond the surface, to understand the motivations and vulnerabilities that drive their behavior. This understanding, in turn, provides you with a far more nuanced and effective defense against their tactics. After all, manipulation often stems from insecurity, fear, or a desperate need for control. By recognizing these underlying factors, you can often disarm the manipulator by appealing to their humanity, rather than engaging in a purely tactical battle. But what about those who seem beyond reach, those who appear utterly devoid of empathy themselves? Ultimately, the most powerful antidote to manipulation is not tactical skill, but genuine connection. Building relationships based on trust, mutual respect, and shared values creates a foundation that is far more resilient than any strategic maneuver. When you foster authentic connections with others, you create a network of support and understanding that makes you less vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation. People are less likely to try to take advantage of someone they genuinely care about. More importantly, ethical behavior is paramount. Machiavellian tactics are not to be used to abuse others for your own personal gain. Consider the contrasting examples of Robespierre and Abraham Lincoln. Robespierre, consumed by paranoia and a rigid adherence to his ideals, saw his fellow citizens as mere tools to be used in the pursuit of revolution. This dehumanizing mindset led to the Reign of Terror, a period of mass executions and political repression. His calculated approach, devoid of empathy and compassion, ultimately led to his own downfall. Robespierre became so distrustful that he saw enemies everywhere, even among his closest allies. This paranoia crippled his ability to lead effectively, and eventually led to his overthrow and execution. In stark contrast, Abraham Lincoln, despite facing immense challenges during the Civil War, succeeded by building trust and inspiring loyalty, even among his adversaries. Lincoln understood the importance of empathy, often reaching out to his political opponents to understand their perspectives and find common ground. His ability to connect with people on a human level, to see them as individuals with their own hopes and fears, enabled him to unite a divided nation and lead it through its darkest hour. What would have happened if Lincoln had viewed the South as predictable? I learned this lesson firsthand in a situation where I tried to outsmart a colleague in a negotiation. I believed I had carefully analyzed their motivations and devised a strategy to get exactly what I wanted. However, my attempt to manipulate the situation backfired spectacularly. My colleague felt betrayed and resentful, damaging our working relationship and ultimately achieving the opposite of my intended outcome. The turning point came when I realized that I had prioritized my own agenda over building a genuine connection. I apologized for my manipulative behavior and made a sincere effort to rebuild trust. While the relationship was never fully restored, I learned a valuable lesson about the importance of authenticity and respect in human interactions. Has there been a time where a carefully laid plan fell apart? The story of Alan Turing and his efforts to crack the Enigma code during World War II provides another compelling illustration of the limitations of algorithms. Turing built a machine, the bomb, to automate the process of decoding German messages. While the bomb was instrumental in shortening the war, it was not foolproof. The Germans constantly adapted their codes, introducing new variables that the machine could not account for. It was Turing's ability to think creatively, to understand the human element behind the code, that ultimately proved decisive. He recognized that the Germans, like all humans, were creatures of habit and prone to making mistakes. By exploiting these vulnerabilities, he was able to break through even the most complex encryptions. What this meant was that human creativity was a necessary ingredient to break human-created encryptions. Reducing people to algorithms undermines ethical behavior because it diminishes their inherent worth and dignity. When you see others as mere data points, it becomes easier to justify manipulative tactics, to disregard their feelings and needs in the pursuit of your own goals. Prioritizing genuine connection, on the other hand, builds trust, strengthens relationships, and creates a foundation of mutual respect. This not only makes you less vulnerable to manipulation, but also enhances your influence and creates opportunities for collaboration. In the long run, a reputation for integrity is far more valuable than any short-term tactical advantage gained through manipulation. Does the ends justify the means? So, the most effective defense against manipulation is not just tactical skill, but a deep respect for human dignity and a commitment to ethical behavior. Where does this all lead us? It leads us to the integration of our Machiavellian journey, with actionable steps towards everyday empowerment. True strength comes not from controlling others, but from empowering yourself to live in accordance with your values, while navigating the complexities of human relationships. And we're just scratching the surface on this point. We're now going to shift gears and explore how to start building your own sense of authentic power. We've journeyed through Machiavellian theory, explored the nuances of self-trust, and confronted the ethical tightrope of understanding manipulation. But theoretical knowledge, however profound, is just potential energy. What good is knowing how to defend yourself if you never put those skills into practice? Now, it's time to convert that potential into kinetic energy and move beyond theory and abstract concepts into the realm of everyday action. The real power lies not in understanding manipulation, but in actively resisting it and shaping your interactions on your own terms. Are you ready to turn knowledge into power? This brings us to the core of everyday empowerment, concrete, actionable steps you can integrate into your daily life to deflect manipulation and cultivate genuine autonomy. These steps aren't about becoming a master strategist or a puppet master. They're about reclaiming control over your own thoughts, emotions, and interactions. We're going to focus on 3 essential pillars. These aren't just abstract ideas. They're practical tools that, when used consistently, can transform your relationships, your career, and your sense of self. Stay with me, because this is where things get truly transformative. The first pillar is enhanced self-awareness, but not in the way you might think. It's not just about identifying your vulnerabilities. It's about real-time monitoring of your emotional and thought patterns during interactions. This means becoming a detective of your own inner world, noticing the subtle shifts in your physiology, emotions, and thoughts as they happen. Think about it. How often do you truly pay attention to your body's signals in the middle of a conversation? Are you aware of the tension rising in your shoulders, the tightening in your stomach, the subtle shift in your breathing? These physical sensations are often the first indicators that someone is attempting to manipulate you. You need to learn to recognize these early warning signs, that your boundaries are being tested, that your emotions are being played upon, or that your thoughts are being subtly influenced. It's about developing a heightened sensitivity to your own internal state, allowing you to catch manipulation attempts as they're happening, not after the fact. The second pillar is strategic communication, and it's all about mastering the art of assertive and empathetic expression. This involves implementing specific communication techniques like I statements, I feel uncomfortable when, I need, I prefer. Active listening, truly hearing and understanding the other person's perspective, and clear boundary setting. I'm not able to do that right now. That doesn't work for me. I need you to respect my decision. The goal isn't to be aggressive or confrontational, but to express your needs and boundaries confidently, while simultaneously fostering understanding and connection. It's about finding that delicate balance between standing your ground and maintaining a respectful dialogue. Think of it as a dance, firm in your resolve but flexible in your approach. How can you clearly express your needs while honoring the needs of the other? The third pillar is proactive boundary setting. This is perhaps the most critical and often the most overlooked aspect of manipulation resistance. It involves establishing clear rules of engagement in all areas of your life relationships, work, online interactions before manipulation even has a chance to start. This means setting expectations, outlining consequences, and consistently enforcing those boundaries to create a manipulation-resistant environment. Do you have a clear understanding of your limits? Have you communicated those limits to others? This pillar is about building a fence around your autonomy, proactively defining what you will and will not tolerate, and ensuring that others respect those boundaries. It's about creating a proactive defense, rather than constantly reacting to attacks. Now, let's bring these pillars to life with some real-world examples. Imagine you're in a negotiation at work, and you notice a rising sense of anxiety as your boss pressures you to accept a deal that feels unfair. Instead of reacting impulsively and agreeing to something you'll later regret, you can use the enhanced self-awareness pillar to call a pause. You might say, I need a moment to consider this proposal. Can we take a 15-minute break? This pause allows you to reframe the situation, regain your composure, and approach the negotiation from a place of strength, rather than fear. As an actionable component to this example, develop a list of your personal early warning signs for emotional triggers. This can act as a personal checklist to understanding when you are being manipulated. Consider this scenario. A family member attempts to guilt-trip you with the classic line, "After all I've done for you." Instead of succumbing to the guilt and doing something you don't want to do, you can use strategic communication to respond assertively and empathetically. You might say, I understand you've done a lot for me, and I appreciate it. However, I'm not able to do that right now. Is there something else I can do? This response acknowledges their efforts, sets a clear boundary, and offers an alternative, demonstrating both strength and compassion. A good actionable component to this example is to rehearse your response to common manipulative phrases. Finally, imagine you're a freelancer starting a new project with a client. Instead of diving in headfirst and risking exploitation, you can use proactive boundary setting to create a terms of engagement document. This document outlines payment terms, deadlines, scope of work, and cancellation policies before you even start the project. This prevents misunderstandings, sets clear expectations, and protects you from being taken advantage of. An actionable component of this pillar is to create templates for contracts and agreements, preventing exploitation before it starts. These actions extend far beyond mere self-defense. Increased self-awareness fosters self-reliance and healthier relationships, allowing you to make choices that align with your values and needs. Strategic communication builds mutual respect and prevents power imbalances, creating a more equitable and fulfilling dynamic in your interactions. Proactive boundaries promote autonomy and prevent future manipulation attempts, giving you a greater sense of control over your life and your relationships. The beauty of these pillars is that they reinforce each other, creating a virtuous cycle of empowerment. As you become more self-aware, you communicate more effectively, which leads to stronger boundaries, which, in turn, enhances your self-awareness. It's a positive feedback loop that can transform your life. We've now armed ourselves with 3 key pillars and actionable steps towards everyday empowerment. We've learned to monitor our internal states, communicate assertively, and set proactive boundaries. These tools offer a powerful defense against manipulation. But here's a dose of reality. Setbacks and unforeseen circumstances can still arise. The world is unpredictable, and even our best efforts can sometimes fail. What happens when even our best efforts fail and we find ourselves facing unexpected challenges or betrayals? What then? We've armed ourselves with enhanced self-awareness, strategic communication, and proactive boundary setting. Powerful tools indeed. But here's the harsh truth. Even with these pillars firmly in place, life can still throw curveballs. Setbacks happen, betrayals occur, unexpected challenges arise. Are we defeated then? Absolutely not. This isn't about negating the value of what we've learned, but about preparing for the inevitable storms and understanding that resilience is not just about bouncing back. It's about growing stronger in the process. This brings us to the crucial concept of resilience in the face of adversity. How do we navigate those moments when our best-laid plans crumble, when the people we trust the most let us down, or when life simply deals us a bad hand? It all begins with acknowledging imperfection. No one is perfect. We will make mistakes. We will misjudge people. We will encounter situations beyond our control. What this means is, we must accept that setbacks are an unavoidable part of the human experience, not a reflection of our inherent worth or competence. Another key element is reframing setbacks as learning opportunities. Every failure, every disappointment, every unexpected challenge holds a valuable lesson. In other words, instead of dwelling on what went wrong, we must focus on what we can learn from the experience and how we can use that knowledge to grow and improve. Seeking support and building a network is the next crucial element. We are not meant to go through life alone. Leaning on friends, family, mentors, or even a therapist can provide invaluable emotional support, guidance, and perspective during difficult times. What this means is, we must cultivate strong relationships and be willing to ask for help when we need it. We also need to remember maintaining perspective and focusing on the long term. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to get caught up in the immediate pain and frustration of a setback. Maintaining a broader perspective, remembering our long-term goals, and focusing on what truly matters can help us weather the storm and keep moving forward. In essence, we must not let temporary setbacks derail our overall vision. Let's consider some real-world examples. Imagine a situation where someone experiences a deep betrayal by a trusted friend or colleague, despite having strong boundaries and self-awareness. Let's call this person Sarah. Sarah had always been careful about who she let into her inner circle, but she misjudged a new colleague who seemed genuinely supportive. This colleague, driven by envy, sabotaged Sarah's project, taking credit for her work and damaging her reputation. Initially, Sarah was devastated. She felt foolish for trusting the colleague and questioned her own judgment. However, Sarah acknowledged her vulnerability. She realized that even with the best precautions, she was still susceptible to deception. She chose to forgive the colleague, though not to forget the betrayal, and focused on rebuilding her reputation through hard work and integrity. She also used the experience to refine her approach to relationships, becoming more discerning and less trusting of superficial displays of support. In this scenario, Sarah faced a Machiavellian tactic with resilience, ultimately learning from the betrayal and refining her strategies rather than succumbing to despair. Now, Let's think about a setback in a career or business venture, despite careful planning and execution. Consider the story of Mark, who invested his life savings into a startup company based on a promising new technology. Mark conducted thorough market research, assembled a talented team, and developed a solid business plan. However, unforeseen circumstances, a sudden shift in market demand, and the emergence of a competing technology led to the company's failure. Mark lost his investment and faced significant financial hardship. Instead of giving up, Mark reframed the failure as a learning opportunity. He sought advice from mentors and industry experts, analyzed what went wrong, and identified key mistakes in his strategy. He then used this experience to pivot toward a more successful path, launching a new venture in a related field, this time with a more resilient and adaptable business model. Machiavelli emphasized the importance of adapting to changing circumstances, and Mark embodies this principle, using his setback as a catalyst for growth and adaptation. Finally, let's consider a health challenge or personal crisis that tests someone's resilience and self-trust. Take the example of Maria, who was diagnosed with a serious illness that required extensive treatment and significantly impacted her physical and emotional well-being. Maria faced immense challenges: pain, fatigue, uncertainty about the future. Despite these difficulties, she sought support from loved ones, joined a support group, and maintained a positive outlook, focusing on her long-term goals of recovery and a return to a fulfilling life. She actively engaged in her treatment, researched her condition, and advocated for her needs. Maria, in maintaining a positive attitude and proactively addressing her health, demonstrates the importance of self-trust and resilience in overcoming adversity, and how a healthy mind can promote a healthy body, in line with Machiavellian techniques for long-term power and effectiveness. This leads us to an important distinction: resilience versus anti-fragility. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity. Anti-fragility, a term coined by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, goes a step further. It's the ability to not only withstand challenges, but to actually grow stronger as a result of them. An anti-fragile system thrives on disorder and volatility, becoming more robust with each stressor. The challenges we face are not merely obstacles to overcome, but opportunities for growth, learning, and self-discovery. Each setback refines our understanding of ourselves, sharpens our skills, and strengthens our resolve. This process, in turn, allows for self-trust to flourish. Each time we overcome a challenge, we build confidence in our ability to handle future difficulties. This self-trust becomes a bedrock of our resilience, enabling us to face uncertainty with courage and optimism. The Machiavellian system advocated in this video, with its emphasis on self-awareness, strategic thinking, and proactive action, prepares you to respond to these events better than average. By understanding human nature, anticipating potential threats, and cultivating your own strengths, you're better equipped to navigate the storms of life and emerge stronger on the other side. Have you considered that what doesn't kill us truly does make us stronger, and this is especially true if you've prepared yourself for it? In essence, resilience isn't just about surviving. It's about thriving. It's about transforming setbacks into stepping stones and using challenges to fuel our growth. But how can we integrate these principles into our lives, starting today? How can we cultivate the resilience we need to weather any storm and emerge stronger, more self-assured, and more in control than ever before? Stay with me, because our final takeaway is about to propel you into action and ultimate personal power. We've established that resilience is the ability to bounce back and grow stronger in the face of adversity. But even the most resilient among us will face situations where simply bouncing back isn't enough. What happens when the rules of the game change, when your carefully constructed defenses are rendered obsolete, or when you realize that the path you're on is no longer viable? This brings us to the art of strategic adaptation, the ability to bend without breaking, to adjust your tactics and strategies in response to changing circumstances or new information. Is it enough to simply be resilient when the truly powerful are adaptable? Strategic adaptation is the ultimate skill for long-term resilience against manipulation. Think of it as the ability to morph your defenses, to become like water, flowing around obstacles rather than crashing against them. But this isn't about abandoning your principles or compromising your integrity. It's about maintaining an ethical compass, ensuring that all adaptations align with your core values. After all, what good is survival if it comes at the cost of your soul? Adaptation without ethics is merely another form of manipulation, and that is not the path we seek. So, what exactly does an adaptive mindset entail? What are the key components that allow us to navigate the ever-changing landscape of human interaction? First, there's continuous assessment and feedback. This means regularly evaluating the effectiveness of your current strategies. What's working? What isn't? Are your boundaries holding firm? Are your communication tactics resonating? Are you accurately reading the intentions of those around you? What this means is, we can't rest on our laurels, assuming that what worked yesterday will work today. The world is constantly evolving, and we must evolve with it. Another critical component is the willingness to abandon ineffective tactics. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of strategic adaptation, especially when we've invested significant time and effort into a particular approach. Identifying when a strategy is not working and being willing to let it go, even if it was previously successful, requires humility and a healthy dose of self-awareness. How many times have you persisted with a failing strategy, clinging to the hope that it will eventually turn around, only to find yourself further down the wrong path? In other words, strategic adaptation demands that we be ruthless in our assessment, willing to cut our losses and move on. Creativity and experimentation are also critical for strategic adaptation. This involves exploring new approaches and techniques, adapting them to your unique circumstances. It's about thinking outside the box, challenging assumptions, and being willing to try new things. Think of it like this. If you're facing a manipulator who's using a tactic you've never encountered before, you can't rely on your old playbook. You need to improvise, to come up with a creative solution that throws them off balance. Strategic adaptation is also about expanding your repertoire of responses, so that you're not always relying on the same tired strategies. Finally, there's embracing uncertainty and ambiguity. This means accepting that you may not always have all the information you need, and being comfortable making decisions in the face of uncertainty. Manipulators thrive on creating confusion and doubt, exploiting our desire for certainty. What this means is, you must be able to tolerate ambiguity, to make informed decisions based on incomplete information. Embrace the unknown rather than shrinking away from it, to be one step ahead of those who seek to manipulate you. As we embrace uncertainty, we make the manipulator uncomfortable, causing them to make mistakes. Let's consider some real-world examples of strategic adaptation. Take the case of Netflix. Initially, they were a DVD by mail service, but they saw the writing on the wall, recognizing the shift towards streaming. Netflix boldly adapted its business model, investing heavily in streaming technology and original content. This move initially faced criticism, but it ultimately transformed Netflix into the dominant force it is today. Consider the alternative. Had Netflix rigidly stuck to their original business model, they would likely be another blockbuster, a relic of the past. This business decision stands as a testament to the power of adaptation in the face of changing circumstances. Now, let's think about a military leader who adjusts their battle plan based on real-time intelligence and enemy movements. Imagine a general who stubbornly sticks to their original plan, even as the enemy shifts their forces and exploits weaknesses in the defense. The result is almost certain defeat. A truly effective military leader like General George Patton remains flexible, constantly assessing the situation, adapting their tactics, and exploiting emerging opportunities. Patton's success in World War II was due in no small part to his willingness to adapt to changing circumstances and to think outside the box, often surprising his enemies with unexpected maneuvers. What about a person who adapts their communication style to better connect with a loved one, even after years of knowing them? Take, for example, a couple who has been together for many years. Over time, their individual needs and communication styles may evolve. If they rigidly cling to their old ways of interacting, they may find themselves drifting apart. A healthy relationship requires constant adaptation, a willingness to listen, to understand, and to adjust your approach to meet the changing needs of your partner. Consider how many families fracture due to the failure to adapt and grow. Machiavelli himself provides a powerful example of strategic adaptation. Despite his initial success as a diplomat and political figure in Florence, he was eventually exiled when the Medici family regained power. Instead of succumbing to despair, Machiavelli adapted to his new circumstances. He used his time in exile to write The Prince, a work that would secure his legacy and influence political thought for centuries to come. In his writings, he also adapted his own political views to reflect the changing political landscape. Machiavelli turned a personal setback into an opportunity to share his wisdom with the world. What this means is, every challenge is an opportunity. What then are the benefits of strategic adaptation? What makes it such a crucial skill for navigating the complexities of life and resisting manipulation? Increased resilience is one key benefit. By being able to adapt to changing circumstances, you're better equipped to bounce back from setbacks and overcome challenges. Improved decision-making is another benefit. By constantly assessing the situation and being willing to adjust your approach, you're more likely to make sound decisions, even in the face of uncertainty. Strategic adaptation also gives you greater control over your interactions. By being able to read people and adapt your communication style, you can influence outcomes and build stronger relationships. Strategic adaptation contributes to long-term success in any field. It allows you to respond effectively to changing circumstances and seize new opportunities. But it also requires a growth mindset, viewing challenges as opportunities for learning and development. Are you ready to view difficulties not as roadblocks but as stepping stones to growth? Think about it. If the world never presented you with problems to solve, you would never progress or learn. Maintaining a Machiavellian lens allows someone to see the need to adapt to remain in power, or simply to protect themselves. We have now constructed a formidable arsenal against manipulation: enhanced self-awareness, strategic communication, proactive boundary setting, and the power of resilience. But even with all of these, our defense remains incomplete without the crucial element of strategic adaptation. We have to be willing to adapt. We have to be willing to remain flexible. We have to change our plans on the fly to meet new challenges. We now know the key components of strategic adaptation and their role in long-term resilience. But I must ask, how do we bring it all together? How do we synthesize everything we've learned into a complete Machiavellian shield, one that protects us from manipulation while empowering us to thrive? And how can you, the viewer, begin this journey today? Stay with me, for the secret lies in the active application of all of these principles, transforming knowledge into power. We've seen how strategic adaptation allows us to navigate the ever-shifting landscape of human interaction, bending without breaking, and adjusting our tactics as needed. But even the most adaptable strategies can leave us vulnerable if they're not grounded in a solid foundation. What if your adaptations are reactive, constantly playing catch-up to the manipulator? What if you lack a guiding framework, a set of principles to anchor your decisions. This is where the concept of the Machiavellian shield comes into play, not as a rigid set of rules, but as a dynamic framework for ethical self-defense. Are you prepared to build an impenetrable defense? The Machiavellian shield is the culmination of everything we've discussed, encompassing self-awareness, strategic communication, boundary setting, resilience, and adaptation. It's not a physical object, of course, nor is it a magical incantation. The shield is a mindset, a skill set, and a commitment to ethical self-defense in a world where manipulation is all too common. Think of it as your personal code of conduct in the arena of power, ensuring that you remain true to yourself while navigating complex social interactions. But what are the core components of this shield? How do we forge it, and how do we wield it effectively? The Machiavellian shield comprises three interconnected components: constant vigilance, strategic planning, and ethical flexibility. Constant vigilance is the ongoing awareness of power dynamics, manipulation tactics, and potential threats in your environment. This involves cultivating a keen eye for detail, understanding human psychology, and questioning assumptions. It means never taking anything at face value, always looking beneath the surface to discern the true intentions of others. What this means is that it is important to observe the subtle cues, the inconsistencies in behavior, and the emotional undercurrents that often betray manipulative agendas. Strategic planning is the proactive development of tactics and counter-strategies to address specific manipulative behaviors. This involves identifying your vulnerabilities, assessing risks, and formulating plans of action. It's not enough to simply recognize manipulation. You must also have a plan for how to respond. It means anticipating the manipulator's moves and developing countermeasures to neutralize their influence. What this means is that if they attempt to use guilt, you have a pre-planned response to deflect the manipulation without succumbing to their emotional traps. You are armed and ready, but are you ethical? Ethical flexibility is the commitment to ethical principles and values, ensuring that all defensive actions are aligned with your moral compass. This requires self-reflection, empathy, and a willingness to compromise. This means that even as you defend yourself, you must remain mindful of the impact of your actions on others. You must strive to find solutions that are both effective and ethical, avoiding the temptation to resort to manipulative tactics yourself. It means recognizing that power is a double-edged sword and wielding it responsibly. But is it really a shield if it has holes in it? These three components are not independent but are interconnected and mutually reinforcing. Constant vigilance informs strategic planning, allowing you to identify the specific threats you need to address. Strategic planning guides ethical flexibility, ensuring that your defensive actions are effective and aligned with your values. Ethical flexibility tempers constant vigilance, preventing you from becoming overly paranoid or cynical. Imagine a triangle, each side representing one of these components. If one side is weak, the entire structure is compromised. This concept provides the backbone of your Machiavellian shield. Let's examine some real-world examples of the Machiavellian shield in action. Consider a person in a relationship who, through constant vigilance, recognizes their partner's subtle attempts at emotional manipulation. Perhaps the partner is constantly using guilt trips to get their way, or maybe they are subtly undermining their self-esteem. This person, having developed emotional regulation through strategic planning, is able to assert themselves calmly and confidently. They communicate their boundaries clearly, refusing to be drawn into emotional games. The ethical flexibility component ensures they do so kindly, without escalating the conflict or resorting to manipulative tactics of their own. Now, picture an employee who, through constant vigilance, recognizes the subtle signs that their boss is undermining their position. Perhaps the boss is constantly taking credit for their work, or maybe they are subtly isolating them from their colleagues. This employee, having used the concepts taught in this video, avoids being undermined by documenting everything, building alliances, and setting clear boundaries. They keep meticulous records of their accomplishments, cultivate strong relationships with their colleagues, and refuse to be intimidated by the boss's tactics. They are aware, armed, and prepared to act. The ethical component ensures that person never acts unethically, thus ensuring long-term success and avoiding a descent into darkness. Consider a political leader who, through constant vigilance, is aware of the various factions vying for influence. They understand the power dynamics at play and recognize the manipulative tactics that are being used to sway their decisions. By using strategic planning and Machiavellian techniques, the leader is able to rise in power without being manipulated by nefarious actors. The person is never unethical, ensuring they are a good leader, not one who will succumb to corruption. Through their knowledge and planning, that leader is able to maintain their integrity and use their position to serve the greater good, rather than becoming a pawn in someone else's game. How would you use the Machiavellian shield? The transformative potential of the Machiavellian shield lies in its ability to empower you to navigate the complexities of human interaction with greater confidence, resilience, and integrity. A truly empowered individual is not just skilled in manipulation, but also committed to using their power for good. It is important to take this seriously, as being manipulated by others can have devastating consequences. This means that if you don't take your own power seriously, others will gladly take it from you. Is it not your duty to protect yourself? Maintaining and adapting the concepts learned is just as important as learning them in the first place, as the world is constantly changing. And so, we are constantly forced to adapt and change with it. The Machiavellian shield is not a static achievement but an ongoing journey of personal growth and ethical development, and is a mindset that you have to cultivate every single day. Think about it. The moment you become complacent, the moment you stop being vigilant, is the moment you become vulnerable to manipulation. And so we arrive at a crossroads. We've armed ourselves with knowledge, strategies, and a powerful shield. But what does it all mean? What kind of life can we create when we refuse to be manipulated, when we embrace our power, and when we commit to ethical self-defense? What awaits us on the other side of this journey? Stay with me, for the answer lies not just in understanding the Machiavellian shield, but in wielding it with purpose and shaping our own destinies. And in shaping those destinies, we will find control over our lives. But where do we begin this wielding process, and how can you, the viewer, begin this journey today? As we reach the end of our exploration, from understanding Machiavelli's strategies to building your personal Machiavellian shield, it's time to synthesize these ideas and consider their ultimate implications. What have we learned on this journey, and how can we apply these insights to our daily lives? What is the final takeaway that you can use to defend yourself? In essence, you are now equipped to identify and resist manipulation, moving beyond a mere understanding of tactics to forming ethical means of self-defense. You now have the tools to recognize manipulation, to strategize against it, and to defend yourself ethically. We have reframed Machiavelli, showing how his insights can enable positive change, not just ruthless ambition. Contrary to the common misconception of Machiavelli as an advocate for amorality, we see that he provided the framework for resisting those who are amoral. How will you use this knowledge? Remember the Machiavellian shield we discussed, and how it comprises vigilance, planning, and ethics. This is the backbone of your defense. Combining self-trust with action allows you to use strategic ambiguity and feigned weakness without sacrificing your personal integrity. Remember how strategic ambiguity allows you to control the narrative, keeping manipulators guessing. Remember how feigned weakness allows you to uncover their true intentions. These tactics, within the broader framework of ethical self-defense, help you overcome the challenges of navigating complex social interactions, protecting you from those who would seek to exploit you. These tactics help you overcome the challenges of manipulators trying to take your power from you. The ultimate takeaway, the one thing to remember, is that true power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering yourself and living in accordance with your values. These techniques are meant to empower you, not dominate others. Self-awareness and self-control are the basis for avoiding manipulative tactics. The ultimate goal is personal freedom through knowledge. Freedom to make your own choices, freedom to live your life on your own terms, and freedom from the influence of those who would seek to control you. What part of your life can you apply this to? This isn't just about avoiding manipulation. It's about building healthier relationships and a more ethical society. The implications of this extend far beyond personal growth, impacting our communities and our world. In a world where manipulation is rampant, understanding these techniques is key to acting for good. When nefarious actors are scheming at every turn, ethical considerations become paramount, not secondary. After all, a world of manipulative people makes ethical considerations even more critical. Isn't it your duty to conduct yourself ethically? I have confidence that you can use this knowledge responsibly. You are now more empowered than before, better equipped to navigate the complexities of human interaction. This information will keep you safe, and you can handle it. This is not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter, one where you embrace your power and shape your destiny. It is my sincerest hope that you will now take action for the betterment of yourself and the world. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. What step will you take today to reclaim your personal power? Go forth, build your Machiavellian shield, and shape your destiny.